right, so let's just get right into the headlines because, look, we have a lot happened yesterday. A lot and then nothing at the same time.
Sum up conference realignment.
Yeah, so
it's the boogeyman that we can't escape.
if you saw Craven's piece I believe last weekend, not this past weekend, last weekend, about UTSA being a potential candidate for the Pac-12. Of course, Pac-12 made some waves when they added teams from the Mountain West, kind of sneakily.
Boise State, Colorado State, San Diego State, Fresno State. They had the option to add the entire Mountain West, yes. But of course they were like, we're too good to add the entire Mountain West, even though they have 2 teams only.
So, and this is where I'll pass it off to Craven because to kind of take it from here. But that's when the news about potential additions of UTSA, and then of course some of the flagship targets that were in the AAC, Tulane, Memphis, USF, right? UTSA was among those. So all that happens, and then yesterday, basically, entire AAC basically just says, we ain't leaving. They pull the Leo DiCaprio on Wolf of Wall Street. We're not leaving, including UTSA, who I believe wasn't formally offered, but was the next in line in terms of like the next targeted school. They reaffirmed, the entire AAC reaffirmed. And so now, Pac-12 is kind of in a scramble. The Mountain West obviously is still looking for
the Pac-12 has to get to 8 full members
yes.
by July 2026.
Right. And Mountain West still needs to replace all those members. And now the AAC is potentially looking at expanding even more. Craven, this is where I want you to come in. What's been happening with all of this? Where are you kind of in mentally as far as like realizing how this could affect Texas? Because I think that now moves the targets from UTSA to UTEP or a Texas State even.
I'm so exhausted. None of us got into this to like text ADs and school presidents all week, but that's what we're doing in the middle of, right before week 5 of the college football season. We're dealing with this stuff.
Right.
I think once Tulane, Memphis, and UCF said no, then it was over for UTSA, right? Like, what's the point of going to the Pac-12 if not with those 3 teams? As Carter mentioned, you got to get to 8 teams, and now you're sitting there with the Mountain West and the Pac-12 that are neither at 8 teams, right? They're both at 7, so something's going to have to give behind the scenes. It still feels like a merger would have been in the best interest of both colleges, but egos get involved, and you don't want to be the one that folds, and you have the name brand recognition of the Pac-12. But from what I've heard, the Pac-12 only paying the $2.5 million of exit fees and not the full amount really was the straw that broke the camel's back on this deal. Yeah. And for UTSA, they were hoping for 2 outcomes. Either they get paid by going to the Pac-12 with everybody else, or maybe this makes the American have to give them a full payout, right? They're not at the full $7.5 million, $8 million payout that all that UCF or USF, Tulane, and Memphis were. And so for those 3 schools, if you added the travel cost on and you added the exit fee, how much more money was it going to be for the Pac-12? Right. For the Roadrunners now, it just becomes how much can they get from the American Athletic Conference to stick around.
Right, and that brings up why, another reason why the Pac-12 has struck out with some of these schools, right? You mentioned the exit fee. I believe the exit fee would have been $25 million for the AAC, for the teams leaving the AAC, I should mention. You mentioned
it's $10 million if you give 27 months notice.
Sure.
Which would probably come out as $25 million because now it's negotiated.
Right. And Craven mentioned how the Pac-12 is only willing to cover 2.5 of that, which is incredible. But it showed where they are financially. The other thing that is looming, because we should mention, the Pac-12 had to resort to Utah State, right? Yep. That is now the official member that's joining from the Mountain West, because they've struck out with UNLV. And I believe Air Force, or I don't think Air Force was the target for them, actually.
Air Force is now a target in Plan B
of the Mountain West. Look, they've struck out with some other Mountain West targets as well. Because of the fact, and this is the other thing, in addition to the, again, this is what Craven mentioned. We definitely did not get into all of this to talk about revenue and television deals, but the Pac-12 television deal expires after this year, right? They signed a 1-year deal.
But surely they have another one lined up, right, that they're pitching.
Well, Carter, that's where the AAC, that was the other thing about the AAC. Because if you're a school like UTSA and you say, oh, okay, they're only covering 2.5. Well, in theory, then you're like, well, we're joining a power conference. So therefore, you look at the Big 12's deal, you look at the SEC's deal, you look, obviously not Big 10 or ACC exactly, but the Big 12's deal, right? And you say, if we just made that money, we'll be able to pay that no problem for us. Pac-12 doesn't have that. And they're going to go into a negotiating process with whatever network they want, with basically just the Mountain West plus Oregon State, Washington State. And they're going to look at that and say, why should we give you a deal that's more than the Mountain West that CBS is giving the Mountain West right now?
It's very much Donald Trump. I have concepts of a plan.
Sure. No, 100%.
Is what the Pac-12 had is saying, we're pitching, get the best of the rest, group of 5. We will be the best G5 conference. Once we get that, we will get the TV deal. And then once we get the best TV deal, we will get an automatic slot in the college football playoff.
Right.
But that doesn't happen unless they get Memphis and those 3 other American Athletic Conference schools. And now that they have it,
again, now it just becomes what Craven mentioned, where it's like it probably was in best interest for them just to combine, but egos got involved. They thought the Pac-12 brand. Well, I think one of my buddies on Twitter, Cyrus Smith, mentioned this really well. He's like, the Pac-12 couldn't even leverage its brand well when it had Oregon, when it had USC, when it had Washington, and now you don't have any of those schools, and you still think that you're going to get a major television deal that can, make your conference attractive. So. I think, Craven, you were mentioning this, and we can wrap this up here. You were mentioning that you were always kind of hesitant on UTSA. I guess, like, to the average fan, UTSA, Pac-12, it seems like a no-brainer. But you were always very realistic in terms of, like, I don't really think so. Why were you always kind of hesitant on that, even before, like, the buyout money and all that stuff kind of came out?
Because most of the people who make these decisions are school presidents, and they're risk adverse. Like that, it's not in their best interest to go make a gamble. And this thing's all going to get blown up in 2030 or 2031 when a lot of these grant of rights things blow up, when the college football playoff and March Madness's TV deal gets go away. And so it was just one of those deals where, like, for UTSA, it just always felt like a leverage opportunity. Whereas if Memphis, Tulane, and USF go and you can tag along with that, great. But if not, how much can you squeeze from the American during this opportunity to get more money? Because that's all this is about for all of these schools, is how can you maximize revenue? How can you get more money? When you add in the travel costs, I just don't think it was enough for these other schools. Clearly it wasn't enough because they just don't know what that number is going to be. The interesting part becomes like UTEP and Texas State now, right? Like for UTEP, they've always wanted to get into the Mountain West, but what is the Mountain West really? And can I interest you in UTEP, a Pac-12 school? Like, imagine that since a couple of years ago, right? And like, maybe it does get to that. If the Pac-12 has to get to 9-10 teams to make this thing viable, then that puts New Mexico State and UTEP on their radar. And then with Texas State, everybody loves the Sun Belt. It feels like, I don't want to say cult, but like the Sun Belt's very Southeastern Conference in the way that their fans like just think it's a great conference. Like people really love the Sun Belt. Everybody's happy in the Sun Belt.
Yeah.
But the money doesn't equal what it equals everywhere else. Like UTSA at a full payout from the American is at 3 or 4 times the money Texas State is at the Sun Belt. When does that become an issue for the Bobcats? Like, would they jump at a Pac-12? Would they jump at an American? It's all musical chairs. You're just trying to fill the spots and stay viable. Those are the teams to watch now, is what happens with the Miners, what happens with the Bobcats. It may be nothing, just like with UTSA, but I think they're the ones up right now.
Yeah, to put a bow on this, like you mentioned, I think the Sun Belt kind of took over in terms of like quality of football. Like all the teams are competitive, all the teams are like relatively to the same extent, to the same level, and so I think it kind of took over that cult fandom of the MAC a couple years ago when everybody loved MACtion and was like, oh my gosh, everybody's Buffalo's really good and like Central Michigan's kind of fun, and it's like that's kind of been the Sun Belt now because one, it has the regional tie, right, which I think people like with their conference. And then 2, they've also been really competitive with teams like App State, now obviously Texas State, James Madison. But I agree, like financially, yeah, if you're Texas State and you can join your other peer Texas schools in another conference, yeah, if that comes to that, why wouldn't you take
the Sun Belt is Moneyball. It's like, who can we find that'll get a 650 winning percentage but also take $1 million
right, 100%,
instead of $10 million?
Exactly. Okay, Mallory, let's get to our spotlight games.
All right, let's start off strong. Texas A&M playing Arkansas this Saturday, September 28th at 2:30 p.m. at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, my old stomping grounds. You can watch it on ESPN. Texas A&M coming in as 4-point favorites. The over-under 3.5. Craven, you're going to be in my old stomping grounds this weekend. I'm quite jealous for this game. What are you expected to see from the Aggies this week?
Yeah, Arkansas is a better football team than I think a lot of us imagined going into the season, but they're still not a great football team. Taylor Green at quarterbacks, a Boise State transfer, and he's been really good against Pine Bluff and
Louisville.
UAB. Not so good against OK State and Auburn. So I think he's still adjusting to the Power 4 level. He was 2 of 10 beyond 10 yards last week in that win against Auburn. So I think A&M's going to be able to squeeze this Arkansas offense. But the first 2 weeks of the season, A&M's struggle was against the run. Jaquindon Jackson, our former favorite Duncanville player, is now running back there for the Razorbacks. He's actually 9th nationally in rushing yards per game at 118. So A&M's going to have to play a clean one. Auburn probably wins that game. They averaged 7.1 yards a play, but including 5.6 yards a rush. But they threw 4 interceptions. So if you're Marcel Reed, if you're the Aggies, you're just trying to run the football, stay in front of the chains, not turn the ball over, because this Arkansas offense just isn't good enough to beat you unless you give them easy opportunities.
I totally agree with that, Craven. And when you talk about maintaining the time of possession, A&M's actually done a really good job of that this year. Going into the season, we thought the offensive line, and I think Elko even said it wasn't where they wanted it to be, but they're tied first in the nation, allowing 2 tackles for loss a game. Trey Zune at left tackle has been phenomenal, and they're doing this with injuries. Mark Naboo is out for the season. TJ Shanahan was injured. Basantis was out for a little bit. But it'll be exciting to see Landon Jackson on that other side, the Pleasant Grove.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about I forgot.
There's so many Texas guys on this team. It's the quarterback, it's the running back, it's Andrew Armstrong, the top wide receiver, it's Landon Jackson.
That's a good point.
At defensive end.
So I saw a little bit of the Arkansas-Auburn game, and I couldn't stop laughing at Auburn because they might be awful. They're legitimately awful.
Well, hold on. Hugh Freeze said that if you played that game 9 more times, they'd win 9 times.
Right, exactly.
So, asterisks on that one.
Yeah.
My buddy Peyton
Hugh
Thorne.
Freeze has never lost a football game.
Or no, sorry, he didn't start that game. He ended up coming in for Hank.
Yeah.
But aside, Taylor Green, I do agree, Craven. He's not very polished right now. He's a very entertaining quarterback because he's somebody who, if they get pressure on him, right, if Mike Elko is able to generate pressure, the play isn't over, right? Because he's able to have that decisiveness. I think his mistakes have come when he's tried to keep the play alive in the pocket. He's at his best when he just decides to just tuck it and run. He had a couple of deep shots, which I think that's the interesting thing with this Arkansas team is they obviously Craven mentioned the throws beyond a certain amount, but Taylor Green still has an arm to where I believe it was who was it? Isaiah Sategna, who he had a long shot to, which was one of the only deep shots of the game. But it was it showed that ability to, and it was I'm curious if things break down like it did on that one play, Taylor Green can stretch the field, but A&M's defense has been good enough to where those type of things haven't happened. So
A&M's defense is giving up some explosive plays. The Notre Dame game, it was on the rushing attack to Jarian Price. And then also in the Bowling Green game, they had a coverage bust in the third quarter.
Yeah.
And let the tight end, I forget his name, but he's the best player on Bowling Green. He had multiple touchdowns.
So just real quick on Marcel Reed as the last point. Craven, did you see, again, Bowling Green, asterisk, whatever you want, but did you see enough from him to be I'm comfortable with this still being a discussion, even when Connor Wigman's healthy, right, that he should be the starting quarterback?
Yeah, I feel like I've first guessed this thing the whole offseason. I just think Marcel Reed fits what A&M can do offensively. They're going to be a run-the-ball first offense. Colin Klein prefers that anyway. But I just don't think they have the weapons around the quarterback to be a pocket-passing dynamic offense. Noah Thomas hasn't, taken the next step. Ja'Day Walker hasn't been, super incredible. Moose Muhammad can't even get on the field against Bowling Green because Mike Elko's saying he needs to be more consistent. The tight end has probably become the biggest weapon passing wise in that offense. So if that is all true, if the offensive line still isn't tremendous in pass pro, if you don't have a lot of weapons on the outside that can go win their one-on-one matchups, then give me a quarterback that can just go make plays. Early in the game against Florida, we saw that with his legs and just his ability on third down. I think at Bowling Green early on, they were really good on third down and stuff as well. And so I just think as presently constructed and combined with what the offensive coordinator wants to do, Marcel Reed's the answer for this program until proven otherwise. And if A&M can go win this football game, they have they have Mizzou at home, a bye week, and Mississippi State up next, right? So they could get to 6-1 theoretically. Mizzou hasn't been as good as we thought they were going to be. That's going to be a home game. So this one feels like a big one for the Aggies. They can kind of become hey, let's watch this team kind of creep into the top 20 if they win this one. If they lose this one, it's a turn the page to 2025 because the rest of the season doesn't matter too much.
Texas A&M has won 11 of the last 12 in this one, but it's always really close because it's in Jerry World. It's kind of the same thing as the Red River rivalry where the best athletes from their respective states go to a neutral site and lose their minds in this game. Yeah. But Mallory, this is the last Jerry World game for Texas A&M Arkansas.
I know. It makes me sad because we love our friends at the Arlington Sports Commission.
They gotta
and
move.
It makes me.
They're moving it to the Star in Frisco. No, I'm just kidding.
that would be
No,
that would be
the UTA Stadium.
No kidding. UTA Stadium. That's amazing.
All right, what's next, Mallory?
All right, let's go to Dallas. SMU hosting Florida State this Saturday at 7 p.m. You can watch it on ACC Network. SMU coming in as 4.5-point favorites. The over-under is 47.5. Carter, I know you're going to be at this game, but I want to give Craven the first word here. Craven, what are you excited to see what Kevin Jennings and this offense can do against this Florida State defense?
You can't even get through the question.
Yeah, for me, the matchup's more the Florida State offense versus the SMU defense. I mean, we saw SMU score 3 non-offensive touchdowns last week. They almost added a fourth, or actually almost added 2 more with the kickoff return and then an interception that was tackled at the one that they scored a play or 2 later. So, let us all be so lucky to work for a boss that wouldn't fire us or bench us if we were as bad as DJU's been so far this season. Florida State's 126th in the country in scoring offense at just 15 points per game. FSU has 6 touchdowns in the first 4 games. For reference, UTEP has 7. Let's let that sink in for a second. The defense is pretty average. They're top 50 in scoring, but they're not very good against the run. 88th against the run, and that's where SMU is going to have to feast here offensively. We saw it last week against TCU. Kevin Jennings, even if he's not the one running the football, helps this run game because he provides a number. The linebackers cannot just focus on the running backs. There has to be one that accounts for the quarterback, that opens up stuff for Brashard Smith. Jalen Knighton out for the year for SMU, so it's going to be Smith, LJ Johnson, Kevin Jennings in the run game. I think SMU has enough to win this one, but Florida State's going to have the talent advantage. This is still a team that entered the season ranked in the top 10. Maybe they figure out and start rolling, but SMU feels like the program that is playing better football right now. They're at home. They should be pretty jacked up for this one since it's the ACC opener. So give me the Ponies.
Yeah, I agree. Give me the Ponies in this one. They did score 66 points last week, but this game might be 14-9. It's gonna be ugly out there, but I think SMU's gonna win this. Ish, I'm workshopping a take. Okay.
Oh God. All right, what's happening?
Bear with me. This is gonna sound mean when I first say it. This is nothing against SMU. They've done their part, played well. Yeah. But this game was supposed to be so awesome and exciting, and it still could be when you looked at it preseason.
Yes.
And now everything that SMU has worked so hard for to get to the ACC, it was supposed to be culminated by a Florida State game, and instead you're on the ACC network against a 1-3 ball club that spent all summer trying to sue their way out of the conference.
Yeah, I think that for me, the hype around this game was always going to be on SMU, always going to be with SMU, right? Like in terms of they were going to be excited for this. But it was also the idea of Florida State bringing in their crowd and their hyped up fans and the neutral crowd to want to see Florida State in Dallas. And that's gone.
SMU did their part. Again, they did their part.
100%. I agree. By the way, I should mention, Leah C. Makopoulos from the DMN mentions LJ Johnson is day-to-day with a concussion. So we'll see about him. But even regardless of that, this Florida State team is not very good. This is a team that's kind of, I think it's been Craven, you can confirm this. They're like a cautionary tale of the transfer portal, right? Where it's they tried to fix a lot on that defense in particular. Obviously, they brought in DJU to help the quarterback position. And they probably bet a little too much on those. Like you mentioned how he's still starting at quarterback. That's because they don't have a guy that they've developed from high school that they feel confident in to bring in. So it's very interesting to see SMU, who's done it kind of the opposite way of a nice balance of high school recruiting and in having portal guys here and there versus a team that just has to basically throw away this season because let's not forget by week 2 they were eliminated from the college football playoff because they had played 3 games. They'd already played 3 games and they were done. They were out. They were the first team eliminated from the playoff because they played an extra game and they'd lost all of them and one of them was a conference game or 2 of them were conference games already. So I don't know if that kind of your sense as well as Florida State is a team that like everybody talks about portal, but it's like, I don't know, man. This team should have been like a national title contender.
Yeah, I think what the portal does is it gives you a ton of variance. Like you can hit and you can be undefeated and get, left out of the college football playoff like we saw last year. Florida State guys like Keon Coleman really hit. Travis Hunter, obviously grows up and really hits there. But there's the flip side of it to where if you roll the dice and you come up, craps, well, now you're 1-3 and your season's over before it really even gets started. It seems to me from the outside that Florida State thought the sum of the parts were better than they were. Like you don't bring in DJU if you need him to go win you football games.
Right.
You bring in DJU if you think your offensive line is good enough, your running back is good enough, your wide receivers are good enough where he can be Oregon State DJU, not Clemson DJU. But now they're asking him to be the Clemson guy that went out and won football games, and he is not built to do that. And so if the defensive line isn't stellar like it was supposed to be, if the running game doesn't work, I mean, they've had 2 offensive tackles hurt for most of the year, and then their third best offensive tackle from last year is starting for TCU right now, and Bless Harris. So I think some of it was Mike Norvell just thought the rest of the team was better than it was. Sure. And that's something we've seen from some of these portal staffs. We can talk about TCU here later, is I think it just makes it hard to get a read on who you are.
Yeah.
And it just feels like Norvell missed the mark on who they were going into the year, and he got the wrong quarterback to match with it.
Craven, did y'all ever watch QB1 Beyond the Lights Netflix
I never
series?
saw it, no.
Okay, so I literally think that the QB1 show where DJ Uyunglele takes Real Mitchell's job at St. John Bosco, who was being featured on the show, has made us believe, and the 5-star ranking has given him so many more chances to play college football. And I think somewhere Real Mitchell is like
I think
back,
Craven
like,
has a point about like what they ask him to do, right?
Exactly.
Because he followed. You look at the Clemson thing, and we can get back. Obviously, we'll get back on Texas in a bit. But it's like you look at the Clemson thing. Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and everybody just thought DJU, right? And it's like I don't think he was never a game-changing type of quarterback. And I think Craven mentioned the Oregon State year last year, a good year, solid year. He's not somebody who you've come in and plug in and fix. That you maybe, or rather, to bring this back to SMU. If you have somebody that's struggling, you then have the base or the foundation to then replace him with somebody you're confident in, like SMU has. And that's where we can kind of end it, Craven, is with Kevin Jennings and what we saw last week with him. I put out the stat on Twitter about like how this kid's just like literally just won something in literally 3 of his 4 starts, right? What does it say about to converse with Florida State that SMU was able to have this issue going into the season, eventually make a decision, and then now potentially reap the benefits? Obviously, we'll see how the rest of the season plays out, but like right now, it looks like they made the right decision because I don't see last week going exactly the way. I know they had non-offensive touchdowns, but I don't see last week running as smoothly if Preston Stone's in.
Yeah, the foundation still has to be set. Like, you just can't keep building. I don't know if y'all watched Monty Python growing up, but, like, you can't build the castle on the swamp a bunch of times in a row, right? Like, some of them are going to sink. And Florida State's just in one of those years where it's going to sink because they missed the mark. They didn't get the Keon Colemans from the transfer portal. They didn't hit at quarterback like Miami seemingly has with Cam Ward. Remember, they were in that race as well.
They were in the race.
With Miami. So it just feels like a house of cards for Florida State. And occasionally, if you hit, if you blackjack those every single time, then you're going to have a 12-0 awesome season. If it doesn't go that way, it's going to fall off the rails real quick. And then what is your culture? What is your depth behind it? Because they're just a bunch of hired guns.
Yeah. All right. What's next, Mallory?
All right. Let's go down to San Marcos, shall we?
Well, it's technically NRG.
Is it being played at NRG?
Yeah,
that rocks.
So Sam had a contract with NRG to play the SFA game. And of course, when SFA, they stopped the rivalry, they had one more year. So they
that rocks.
Texas State, so.
I love that. Okay. Well, all right, let's go to NRG this Saturday at 2 p.m. Texas State playing Sam Houston, and you can watch it on ESPN+. Texas State coming in as 8-point favorites, over under 55.5. Craven, this also feels like a miss on your part. This feels like an ROF game of the week to me. How dare you go to Agtown instead of this game?
Yeah, Jacob Rodriguez from Square in the Pod will be there for us on the Texas State side, so we'll be represented. This does feel like a Dave Campbell's Bowl here. It's possible that we hyped up the wrong G5 bowl game this whole time, right?
I know.
Like all off season, we did UTSA versus Texas State, and the whole time it was Texas State versus Sam Houston. That was the big G5 game of the year. Sam Houston can catapult itself into Conference USA, favorite realm, and then also G5 playoff spot conversation if they are in this. The FPI Plus or whatever has one team from the state of Texas with a top 10 chance of making the college football playoff. It's not the Bobcats. It's not the Roadrunners. It's the Bearcats from Huntsville.
All right, so I'm very curious. Craven, you talked about this a little bit in our editorial meeting. It's kind of an underrated rivalry that not many people know about, especially since the name changed to Texas State. This is a rivalry that goes back to Division II, to FCS. And I'm curious if do you know how this kind of picked up steam a little bit in 2007? I'm curious.
Was that the overtime?
No, so
win
this
for
is
Texas
something
State?
this is something off the field that happened. So around that time, I think it was 06, 07, Texas State had the name change from Southwest to Texas State San Marcos. So this is getting a little in the weeds, but it does add a little bit of fuel to the fire because soon after, obviously, they stopped playing in football. But this added a nice little coat of kerosene to the flame. So Texas State is the head of its regents, right? That includes, it's the Texas State Board of Regents with Sam, used to be SFA, now still Lamar, things like that. Sol Ross, I think, is in there. In 2007, there was a proposal to change Sam Houston to Texas State Huntsville. And the students revolted against that name change, and it basically caused a little brother, big brother effect with Texas State saying, you guys are our little brother. You were going to be UTSA to UT to us. And then it caused Sam Houston to go, well, those guys don't deserve to change us to anything because we've won just as much as they have since the 80s and all this stuff. And it created like an animosity there. So there was a real thing, and it would have created a larger funding for Texas State as the flagship school of that region. So again, that's a little bit in the weeds, but like there is a very, very, very real animosity that has been completely ignored since basically these two teams have not played each other.
As all good rivalries start in the administration room.
Yeah, right, exactly. So this is actually a very, very fun rivalry game because, one, you have obviously that. Two, you have a Sam Houston team that I think is good enough to win this game, right? And a Texas State team that's played down to its competition in their week opener, in their season opener against Lamar. So, like, whether or not you do think Texas State is still a playoff contender, sure, I think that's viable. They haven't been above playing to a team that they should beat so far this season. So, yeah.
Ish, I know you have a lot riding on this game, but I think I have more riding on it
Okay, what do you
because
got?
I dropped my top 5 transfers today.
Yes, you
and
did.
UNT fans are very angry that Chandler Morris is not in there, and I put in Hunter Watson at Sam Houston. So I need Hunter Watson to stunt on these guys.
Here comes a 5 interception game. No, look, here's the thing with Hunter Watson, right? And why I think
I need to beat the allegations that I don't know ball because they're out there right
here's
now.
the thing here's what Sam Houston does have with Hunter Watson that worries me. They're going to be able to run the ball with more than just a running back, right? So Hunter Watson, they're running that. I called it when I was watching some clips of the game last week in New Mexico State. I was like, oh, they're running that Walmart Cam Newton offense where it's literally just read option, veer option. I'm going to take it 5 yards, or in the case of one of them, 50 yards for a touchdown. I think that's going to give Texas State some issues because I do wonder still about that front seven versus in the run defensive category.
Yeah, the pass defense.
Pass defense is awesome, right? They're going to be able to get, if Sam Houston has to get in the passing game, they're in trouble. But I do think if they can stay ahead of the chains and keep the ball away from Texas State and Jordan McLeod, which we know that offense, how you get to that offense is getting them off rhythm. And if they get them off rhythm and they control the clock, that turns into a different game.
Yeah, Craven, I want to ask you what your confidence level at Hunter Watson is going into this game. I have no stake in it, just wondering what it is. The one concern I have is that Sam Houston is still in the triple digits, allowing 2.25 sacks per game, and Texas State is, let me check the notes, they're first in the nation in tackles for loss per game.
Yeah, I think Sam Houston's ability to protect, which I think is why we're going to see a heavy run game early. Like the best way to beat a good pass rush is to run right at it. Like ask Micah Parsons. But for me, this one comes down to turnover margin. Like Texas State -2 in turnover margin, Sam Houston +1. Texas State's the better football team, despite Sam Houston having this this great run, and I think they're going to be competitive in Conference USA. They've been the biggest surprise in the state. Like, they don't have an Ishmati. They don't have a Joey Hobart. Like, they don't have Ben Bell. This Texas State team is still better. What you got to worry about is the turnovers. Because if you give a team that's riding high on momentum, like Sam Houston, quick 14 points, and all of a sudden you look up and this thing's 14-3 after the first quarter because Texas State's farting around, like, that may be all the Bearcats need to ride this thing to victory. So if you're Texas State, come out, play clean, kind of like you did against UTSA. Just put this thing to bed early and let your athletes go win it.
Last note on this game, to that point, Tech State has not started well, right? I guess against Lamar they did. They obviously flamed out. UTSA did not. I believe Jordan McLeod threw a pick in the first drive. And then against Arizona State, they ended up trailing really quickly early. So bye week, last week, are idle. So, like, fix that up, clean that up. But starting slow this week could be very detrimental because of how Sam Houston wants to play, to Craven's point. What's next, Mallory?
All right. Let's go to Lubbock. Texas Tech hosting Cincinnati this Saturday at 7 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN2. Texas Tech coming in as 4-point favorites, over under 58.5. Both obviously coming in with big wins on the resume from last week, and it's a sellout night at Jones AT&T Stadium.
Listen, if you are one of the people that is going to make a very, very I'll be very envious of people who are able to make that trip to a very sold-out Jones. If you are making the trek up there, be sure to check in with our friends at Visit Lubbock and Lubbock Sports. A bunch of stuff going on in town. If there's a sold-out game at Texas Tech, there's going to be a ton of stuff to do in the city of Lubbock. The Gambling Gauchos, our very own Lubbock, or I guess Texas Tech correspondent. I don't know if they're actually in Lubbock. But Texas Tech correspondents will be writing a preview on this game on TexasFootball.com. Again, check in with our friends at Visit Lubbock and Lubbock Sports. If you're there Friday, maybe check out a high school game as well. Again, there's going to be
a lot of good high school games out there.
Lubbock High 3-1.
Lubbock High 3-1. Look at that. Look at that. All right. So, with that being said, let's get back on the game preview. Yeah, look, Cincinnati last week, Carter, I want to ask you. You saw that game.
Do we have to?
Houston. Look, I mean, we'll keep it on the Cincinnati side. Because Cincinnati is a team that I think a lot of people assumed would just be, and again, wins over Towson and Miami, and probably the worst team in the Power Five. But regardless, 3-1 right now. What were they able to do well, and was it more on Houston probably being bad, just that bad, or was Cincinnati doing some things where you were like, oh, that could give Texas Tech issues?
Well, what Cincinnati does is they don't turn the ball over. Brendan Sorsby has 8 touchdowns to 0 interceptions on the year, and that was a far cry from last year with Emory Jones at quarterback. So I think they found their guy there. Joey McGuire said in his press conference they have 3 offensive linemen with NFL grades. It's led by Luke Kandra, who was a first-team All-Big 12 guy. A running back who actually, I know Taj Brooks was out for a game, but is ahead of Taj Brooks in the running totals in Corey Kiner. And then the Godfather, Dante Corleone, the defensive tackle for Cincinnati.
Fantastic.
On that three-man stack. They do a lot of stunting, which could give Texas Tech's offensive line fits. Craven, I'm interested with what you think of Cincinnati, but more so, what is the importance of this game for Texas Tech?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge game for Texas Tech. If you want to be in the conversation for Big 12 contention, you can't lose to Cincinnati at home. And Tech's been really good at home. They're 13-3 at Jones under Joey McGuire. Probably the third best environment in the state, behind Texas A&M and Texas, who just have about twice as many fans in the stands. But Tech at night, one of the best places that you can watch a football game for. I think that's a great point. Cincinnati hasn't thrown any interceptions, but they have fumbled the ball 5 times. They're pretty good against the ground. They kind of feel like mirror images teams, right? Like both of these teams are going to want to do the same thing. They're going to use the run to set up the pass, try to be efficient in the pass game, not make any mistakes in there. Just the best running back's going to win. I think Tech's defensive effort last week against Arizona State gives me some optimism here. Arizona State can be a bully football team, wants to run the ball a lot like Cincinnati does. And Tech handled that a lot better last week than they did, against Washington State back in week 2. So I think Tech has a solid matchup here, being at home. Brendan Sorsby has been one of the stories of the year, though, because he was bad at Indiana. Bad. Really, really bad at Indiana. And he's been a solid quarterback for the Bearcats. Cincinnati needed to bounce back in year 2 as a Big 12 member, and they seem to be a much improved football team, but I still think Tech at home should be the favorite. They are the favorite, and if they don't turn the ball over, should be able to win this one.
All right, Carter's looking through your book right now. What are you looking for?
I'm trying to find where you rank Texas Tech on the game day atmosphere in your book.
3 of 12.
By the way,
To see if you ranked them
Dave Campbell's
third.
got it to Texas college football.
Yeah, Dave Campbell's got Texas college football, checking it out right now. You see all the information on all these schools. But, Craven, you do a ranking of you went to all 13 stadiums. I'm trying to see what page
Yeah, they're
it's
3.
on.
You passed it.
Is it on the start? Oh, it's 3 out of
No, it's in
13. I
that
see it right there at the very bottom.
Okay.
Okay.
You're trying to were you trying to correct Craven there? He's like, actually, you ranked it blah blah blah.
I was trying to check his work. Right there. He said 3, and I was wondering if he ranked him higher or lower, but he's got him right at 3. He remembers his stuff. That book project took 6 months.
I was about to say he worked on that for like a year. Of course, he'd remember where he ranked him. So anyway, last week I do want to mention this about Texas Tech. Last week over Arizona State, very impressive win because I still think Arizona State, although a young team, a very much improved team, I thought that they were able to make them a passing team, which of course Sam Levitt made some good throws against that defense, but I do think that the running game, they're able to really establish that. Baron Morton looked comfortable again for Texas Tech, which again he didn't look very comfortable to start the season. I think everything's starting to click going into motion. Even nobody's asking where Micah Hudson is right now because guess what? The receivers are actually doing some things outside of Josh Kelly.
Joey McGuire was asked in his press conference, give a letter grade for the special teams, the offense, the defense, and yourself. Do you want to take a guess at what he said for special teams? Let's go special teams.
Go for it. I've no idea.
He said it's a B before ASU was an A+. What's the letter grade for the offense?
I'm going to go C+. I'm Joey being
He said trending up. They're trending up right now. They're averaging the most points they have since he's been here so far. Defense, what about the defense you think?
B+.
Getting better is what he said. The defense is getting better, giving up the same long pass tweaks in a row. What about him?
C-.
Ask him when they play a road game. And that is season grades with Joey McGuire.
Yeah, there you go. Jesus Christ.
Josh Kelly is a little banged up. He was on the injury report. That's one to watch for Texas Tech going into this one.
Yeah, Josh Kelly, also a guy who was in my top 5 transfers. I believe I had him at number 2 on that because he could be the best receiver they've had since Michael Crabtree, just all around wide receiver.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, again, it's never been about the fact that we've never had a question about Josh Kelly so far this season. It's been like, who else around Josh Kelly can they have? And this week, obviously, Caleb Douglas and Quake and made some decent plays as well. So he's been the standard, and we kind of expected that a little bit when he came in. We were like, he's probably going to be their number 1 by a good margin. It's kind of about surrounding him with talent. So, all right, Mallory, what's the last one?
All right, guys, to round it all out, Baylor hosting BYU this Saturday at 11 a.m. You can watch it on FS1. Baylor coming in as 2.5-point favorites, over under 45.5. This is a Baylor team that got their harps absolutely ripped out by Shador Sanders last week in a Hail Mary. And this is a BYU team that's coming off an absolute romping of Kansas State. So, Craven, what are you going to take away from this game?
Yeah, I think people have jumped the gun on what the Baylor versus Colorado loss means for Dave Aranda, but if it's followed up by a getting blown out at home against BYU, that noise definitely ratchets up and is fair there. This BYU team's really good. They're a top 20 scoring defense at 12.8 points per game. They held an SMU team that just scored 66 points against TCU without a touchdown offensively or defensively. LJ Martin, a really good running back. He's been out, but that hasn't really stopped the BYU offense from being pretty good. You know, Jake I don't know how to say it. Retzlaff has been a solid quarterback, top 40 in passing yards. And then defensively, Jack Kelly is probably their best player up front, 3 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. So a big one for Baylor. I don't think they're the better team here. I'm surprised that they're favored at home by a couple points. That probably means Vegas thinks this is a pick 'em on a neutral site. But BYU with all that momentum combined with Baylor having to get themselves off the mat after such a horrifying loss on the road, I don't know. It'll say a lot about the Bears if they're able to kind of come back from this one and put in a good performance. But I worry that one loss against Colorado becomes 2 losses because they can't get back up after that one.
Yeah. I will say the fact that I got to give Dave Aranda some credit here. No one, the U.S. government, Guantanamo Bay, Rikers, could not have gotten at me that defense was called Victory Scar.
Yeah, that
after
was
the
tough.
game. that would have gone with me to the grave that we called that defense victory cigar.
Don't tell everyone that the defensive play call that didn't work has a name touting how well it will work.
So I agree with Craven. I think that everybody's like, I don't know how Dave Aranda comes back from that. Look, was it a heartbreaking loss? Yes. Did they get dominated by Colorado, which is what it makes it seem?
No, they were dominating.
Absolutely not.
They were dominating. Yes. Did they not finish the game off? Yes,
Correct.
100%. But guess what Colorado did? They relied on some pretty dang good playmakers that are going to be playing NFL
Travis
in a
Hunter.
year. Right? Travis Hunter had an incredible game both ways, ended up getting the game-sealing fumble. Shadur Sanders, an incredible throw, which, by the way, yes, on one-on-one coverage that should not have been, but still, an incredible throw. 2 incredible throws, I should mention. He made some incredible plays. It was individual efforts from Colorado, which is what they've been, and a couple of lapses from Baylor. Now, what will hurt Dave Aranda is, yes, this cascading, right? If they lose to BYU, then they have Iowa State. It's not an easy road coming up.
Yeah, the schedule was really hard after the Colorado game, which
100%.
would make that loss even more tough.
100%. But that Utah loss was not in conference, right? That was a non-conference game that was still just fulfilling that contract. So they're 0-1 in the Big 12. Everything is still there for them. They are okay. But the point is, getting up off the mat, like Craven said, that's where we get to see if this team is still built, if the way Dave Aranda is still building this team is correctly. Because off the field, recruiting's going well, right? There's momentum there. But of course, on the field, you have to start getting wins. And if they can shake off that loss and beat BYU and then beat Iowa State, 2 back-to-back ranked wins, nobody cares about the Colorado loss anymore, in my opinion.
Yeah, this Baylor-BYU game is very similar to the Texas Tech-Cincinnati game. When we looked at this preseason, we chalked it up, that's got to be a win. But then Cincinnati and BYU have played so much better. That bottom half of the Big 12, really, you talk about Arizona State, BYU, and Cincy. They've all outperformed.
I was about to say, speaking of teams that we may need to have different opinions on, Kansas State as well.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll be talking about them maybe in a
Well, okay, but BYU, let's give them credit.
Sure, no, I will. Yes, for now, I will absolutely give them credit.
Because we kind of discredited them against SMU, where like that's more an SMU problem. But then they do it against Avery Johnson and Kansas State. They're 15th in the nation in passing yards allowed. So I think Sawyer Robertson's the guy going forward.
He looks like a different quarterback.
He
looks
does
like
look
a
very
different quarterback.
different.
He's not a he's not a game breaker, but like he is not making. He looked deer in the headlights last year.
Yeah. Speaking of Avery Johnson, BYU fans totaled his touchdown donations after they beat him.
Yeah.
He basically had a fundraiser for someone struggling with cancer for every touchdown pass he threw, and BYU beat him on the field and then exceeded his donations with money.
Yeah, we're going to be nicer and we're going to beat you.
Yeah, Craven, I got a question for you. Is there ever going to be a matchup between 2 nicer fan bases in Baylor and BYU?
No, probably not. That's a pretty solid call right there. This one's big for Baylor. It's absolutely big for. I do think Sawyer Robertson kind of fits what Jake Spavital wants to do a little bit more. You know, he's never been a quarterback run guy. It felt weird watching DeQuan Finn kind of run that offense, just knowing what Jake wants to run. So I think Sawyer fits that better if he can get some help around him. I think Baylor can win this football game, but they're gonna have to play perfect.
Yep. Alrighty, Mallory, let's get into the hurry up lightning round. Let's get out of here.
All right. Let's start off with TCU. Playing at Kansas this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN Plus. Kansas coming in as 1.5-point favorites. Also, can we go back to the fact that this game's on ESPN Plus? Terrible. ESPN Plus.
I spent 2 hours on customer service with ESPN Plus Saturday night. It was great.
That's terrible.
Awesome Saturday.
The over-under is 59.5. Craven, I am tossing this one to you. Both coming off some losses last week. What are you looking for in this game? TCU having to play at in Lawrence.
Yeah, if you're Kansas, just run the ball and then run the ball and then run the ball some more. The Jayhawks are 17th in the nation in rushing. TCU 100th in rush defense. Horned Frogs also -4 in turnover margin. So they don't get better at stopping the run. They don't get better at running the football, and they don't get better at keep taking care of it. This thing's going to cascade pretty quickly for the Horned Frogs.
UTSA playing at East Carolina this Saturday at 3 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN Plus. East Carolina coming in as 3.5-point favorites. Over under 53.5. Ishwan, this one's coming to you.
All right, so UTSA, obviously the offense has not been. I saw some people clamoring for the days of old, not with Frank Harris, but old play callers and things like that. I do want to throw up a stat real quick that Jared Kalmas, shout out Jared from the Alamo Audible, Owen McCown's drop rate, 11%, 11.6% compared to 4% last year of Frank Harris. Help my boy out, right? East Carolina, not very good. They're 2-2 this season. Norfolk State, Old Dominion, their only wins. They looked pretty good against App, but I'm also very shaky on what App is so far this year. We'll see. I think this is a great opportunity for UTSA to right some wrongs on offense, but they gotta help my boy Owen McCown out. Stop dropping passes.
Ish with the Giselle Bunchkin. My husband can't throw and catch at the same time.
Listen, my boy's doing the best he can. We know what Owen McCown is.
Texas hosting Mississippi State this Saturday at 3:15 p.m. You can watch it on SEC Network. Texas coming in as 38-point favorites, over under 61.5. Carter, this one's coming to you. Blake Shapen's out for the season for the Bulldogs. And Texas is business as usual.
Yeah, Texas also has a quarterback out, and maybe it was the best case scenario that Texas won 51-3 and Arch Manning threw 2 picks, so there's not really a quarterback controversy anymore. Arch Manning, you're going to be great, just not for the rest of this year, but you're going to have one more start here in the SEC opener. I'm looking for the Texas Longhorns to roll.
Houston playing Iowa State Saturday at 6 p.m. You can watch it on FS1. Iowa State, 13-point favorites, over under 43.5. Craven, this one's coming to you. What do you want to see from Houston?
The Pac-12 literally just filed suit against the Mountain West Conference. I can't do this. Houston versus Iowa State. Donovan Smith going to get the start at quarterback. I think this may be the last one. Zion Chris is going to get some snaps. If Smith doesn't have one of those, he has 2 or 3 games a year where he looks incredible. If he doesn't have one of those, I think they turn the page for him. Houston's 127th on third downs, 27.6%. Iowa State only allowing 9.7 points per game. Houston's going to steal one this year against a team they shouldn't. I just don't think it's going to be this week.
Yeah.
North Texas hosting Tulsa this Saturday at 6 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN+. North Texas, 7-point favorites, over under 68.5. Ish, talk good about my mean green.
They're gonna look. Tulsa stinks. They've played like 5. They've played like 4 quarterbacks this year. They looked really good against Wyoming. I don't think Wyoming's very good, but I think that's a big step up that UNT's able to squash these teams that they are on paper better than, something that they weren't doing last year. Mm-hmm. I think that trend continues this year. This week, 4-1 UNT. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it after this week because I think it's gonna happen. I'll knock on wood, but I do think Tulsa is not. Oklahoma State doesn't look very good, and they squashed Tulsa. And then I believe what was their loss this year? Arkansas State, who also does not look very good, they beat Tulsa, and it just doesn't look very good. I like UNT a lot not based on what happened in Lubbock. Let's just say that.
I like them. I went to the game on Saturday against Wyoming. They look pretty good.
They look really good. Like I said, this wasn't, even if Wyoming's bad, even if Tulsa's bad, those weren't teams that they were just like absolutely rolling last year.
Yeah,
so
correct.
Good step in the right direction.
Absolutely. To round it all out, Rice playing Charlotte this Saturday at 6 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN+. Rice, 6-point favorites for the Owls. Over under 46.5. Feels like Rice needs this, Carter.
Rice, if you don't win this game, you're cooked.
Yeah, it's kind of looking. Biff Poggi should be the get-right game.
Yeah.
Biff Poggi with his cigar and sleeveless shirt is just sitting there for the taking, and you got to have a win here.
And then, of course, UTEP is on a bye. Our 0-4 Miners. Up next, they play Sam Houston next Thursday. And that'll round out the Week 5 slate, guys.
Whoa, there we go. Nice little slate of games. I will. My attention's obviously going to be at NRG because I'm very excited. Not even as a Tech State grad, I'm excited to see an old rivalry get reignited like that. Even if it is for 1 year, I would love to see them re-up that again. But it was pretty cool to see them as a one-off, just trying to fulfill a contract, just say, hey, let's run it back one time. So that was pretty cool.
One time for the one time.
One time for the one time. All right, that'll do it for us.